We're going to talk a little bit about opting out of Medicare. And as I said in the introduction today, I know a lot of you are frustrated and angry and are just really tired of practicing with the foot on your neck. And there's many reasons for opting out of Medicare. And certainly one of the primary reasons is that physician burnout is really becoming extraordinarily high. It hits on the order of 55%. And so more than half of physicians are affected, and the burnout and satisfaction with work-life balance have worsened dramatically, even though work hours have not increased overall. So what's causing all this burnout? Well, what are the effects of it? Well, first of all, it leads to emotional exhaustion, loss of interest and enthusiasm for the practice of medicine. Leads to depersonalization, a poor attitude with cynicism and treating patients as objects. And number three, it leads to career dissatisfaction, a diminished sense of personal accomplishment, and low self-value. But probably most importantly, burnout results in reduced work hours, relocation, depression, suicide, and harms patients because the physicians who are burned out lack empathy and make errors. Electronic health records, as it turns out, are a major contributing factor to physician burnout. I know that many of you have struggled with electronic health records. They're absolutely terrible. They're poorly designed. They're designed by non-physicians generally, and they consume an inordinate amount of time and really offer little or no benefit for patient care. And so physicians, it leads to burnout of physicians, and again, that has led to poor patient care and worse patient outcomes. So increasing bureaucracy in general is the cause of burnout, and certainly electronic health records are right up there as a major contributory factor to physician burnout. The president of the AMA has addressed this in an article which appeared earlier this year, basically hoping that the regulators, insurers just back off. What do you think the possibilities of that are of happening? Zero and none. So what we face are increasing hoops that physicians have to jump through. Physicians begin to feel like the gerbil on the wheel, running faster and faster just to stay even as far as being able to pay the bills. And with regard to Medicare, well, Medicare obstructs, impedes, and interferes with nearly every aspect of the practice of medicine today, despite the fact that back when Medicare was passed into law, the government promised that it would not interfere in the practice of medicine, and it codified that in Section 1801 of the Social Security Act. But today, of course, the tentacles of Medicare are all over the office. They have their little tentacles in everything. In the exam room, you've got the 2,000-pound government gorilla looking over your shoulder, making sure you don't spend too much on these old folks. So this is the way that many physicians are forced to practice today, just wrapped up in an incredible amount of red tape. So we hear from physicians, well, I would really love to opt out of Medicare, but I really can't do it in my area. I'm surrounded by competitors, all of whom participate in Medicare, and all of my Medicare patients will leave and go to my competitors if I opt out, and I will be out of business. So what we have to say for that is fear of what may happen if you opt out of Medicare, or if you stop signing abusive, one-sided insurance contracts, is the fence that confines you in the pen. Think about that. And for those people, we've sort of developed the pinky toe approach to opting out. That is, dipping your pinky toe into the water to sort of test the temperature before you jump into the pool. And the way to do that in this realm is to basically conduct a brief written survey of your Medicare patients as they come into your office. And such a survey basically would accomplish two purposes. Number one, it would help educate your patients about how the Medicare bureaucracy adversely affects them. And it would also inform them about the substantial benefits of being treated by an opted-out physician. And I'm not going to read this, and it is published, I think, in the in the journal, and it's in your packet. But this is what the survey would kind of look like. Again, to try and educate your patients, because many of them don't even know how Medicare rations care, and they may not even know that there are such things as opted-out physicians. So the Medicare patient survey at the end of this educational handout would basically ask a couple of questions, and again, you can tailor this to your own practice. Number one, in view of the fact that government interference in medicine will continue to restrict our ability to provide you with the quality care you deserve, would you be willing to receive higher quality care provided by an opted-out physician? Ask for any comments. And the second question in such a Medicare patient survey would be, in view of the fact that you are already paying substantial Medicare deductibles and co-pays out of pocket for government rationed care, would you be willing to pay a little more out of pocket to receive better care? Again, getting in to see your physician sooner, having more actual face-to-face time with the physician so that all of your questions and concerns can be appropriately addressed. It turns out, too, that spending more time face-to-face with patients likely leads to fewer malpractice claims. So you're actually addressing their concerns and answering their questions and showing that you actually care about them. It leads to less liability claims. And then there's the risk of prosecution, prison, and ruinous fines. That's always there. And certainly one of the things that's coming to the forefront now is the high-tech law. A lot of physicians took a lot of money, thousands of dollars from the government to implement electronic health records in their office. I think the average amount that physicians took was about $65,000. And now the meaningful use audits are coming through, and they're looking at applying specific requirements to the rather vague requirements that were there early on in the meaningful use part of the program, and they're wanting this money back from physicians. So physicians are receiving letters now from the government saying, give us tens of thousands of dollars back, and we want it now. There's also the RACs, the Recovery Audit Contractors, and these are private bounty hunters who are hired by the Medicare program. Their agenda is to claw back money, supposed overpayments made to physicians in the Medicare program. And of course, as a bounty hunter, they get a percentage of the amount that they recover. Then there's the Zone Program Integrity Contractors, the ZPICs. These folks are looking to hook you up with a crime. Then there's the FBI Healthcare Fraud Task Force, which has jurisdiction over both federal and state insurance programs, and they have 56 field offices. And that's all in addition to the Medicare contractors' own fraud units, and the HHS OIG has fraud units as well. So what are the effects of Obamacare? Well, increased federal sentencing guidelines by 20 to 50% for crimes over $1 million in losses. It increased license checks and site visits for physicians deemed to be high risk for fraud and abuse. And CMS has implemented advanced predictive modeling technology to detect fraud. A lot of the fraud detection is done by proprietary software that's used to mine the very data, the electronic data that you send to the government. They hire people using the software to find evidence of overpayments. And Obamacare also provided an additional $350 million over 10 years to boost anti-fraud efforts. So the other thing, in addition to reducing malpractice claims, it turns out that spending more face-to-face time with patients makes for happier patients. That's sort of a common sense type thing. And then, on April 16th, 2015 of last year, MACRA was passed, Medicare Access and CHIP Reauthorization Act. And this brought, a number of bad things. And of course, the SGR was defeated. Is that cause for celebration? Probably not. Small practices are likely to be the losers under MACRA. And I guess this was an article in Medical Economics. CMS estimates that 87% of the nation's solo practices, nearly 103,000 physicians, will face a penalty in 2019, the first year of the program, to the tune of $300 million. The news is equally as pessimistic for practices of 2 to 9 physicians, an estimated 124,000 physicians who could see penalties to the tune of $279 million. There are winners and losers in macro, and smaller practices are more likely to be the losers. And again, it appears the proposed rule would create a penalty system where the big guys, the larger practices, will be funded by the little guys. So Obamacare and macro basically have the same agenda in mind, and that is, both are designed to eliminate solo physician and small group practices and force physicians into hospital employment and or large accountable care organizations. Again, part of the goal is to eliminate fee-for-service medicine altogether and replace it with ACOs subject to government control. Centralized government control medicine is, of course, the ultimate objective. And then there's the recently published 962-page proposed rule by CMS in the Federal Register, May 9th of this year, which I'm sure you all read the Federal Register before you go to bed. And it's about rules for implementing MACRA. It has to do with merit-based incentive payment system and the alternative payment model, ACOs. And again, this is a system, the MIPS system is a physician involving a physician compliance score. And basically, it will be looking to see how effective the physician is in rationing care so as to conserve Medicare resources. That will get you a higher score, as well as mandatory meaningful use of certified electronic health records. This new proposed rule will also allow all insurance-based care to be phased in to these harmful payment models. And again, you might have seen this in a recent AAPS action alert, which came out on May 13th. So the only piece of good news, really, that came out of MACRA was Section 106, which now allows for an indefinite, continuing automatic extension of the opt-out election. So as Andy mentioned, physicians can now permanently opt out of Medicare. And again, that applies to not only your opting out of Medicare, but the private contracts that you make with patients now are permanent as well. So I have received my opt-out acknowledgement letter. I framed it, and I put it on my office wall where it is proudly displayed today. Also, again, physicians, as I mentioned, those who have submitted their opt-out affidavit after June 16th of last year don't have to renew. You will see that it has a 2-year renewal period still listed, but the 2-year renewal is automatic unless you tell them otherwise. So what are some of the factors to consider in making the opt-out decision? Well, there's financial considerations and non-financial considerations. Under financial considerations, you need to consider the net revenue equation. So that's gross revenue minus expenses equals net revenue. And it turns out that Medicare in particular, it's a very high administrative cost to physician practices. And once you get rid of that very high administrative cost, no longer having to deal with the abusive and intrusive Medicare bureaucracy, you can actually charge reasonable fees and still come out pretty good in the net revenue equation. You also need to look at some of the services that you provide, the type of services, the patient population you serve, and make some assessment about the ability to collect directly from your patients. If you elect to stay in Medicare, you also need to consider the cost of to you and your staff of keeping up with the ever-changing rules and regulations in Medicare and the cost of filing and handling Medicare claims and appeals relative to the small amount of revenue generated by Medicare. If you decide to opt out, it may also be helpful to try and find a niche service, if possible, and you need to think about ways to develop a marketing campaign to inform patients of the benefits of seeing an opted-out physician. So what's a niche service? Well, a niche service may be a service that Medicare has deemed is worth zero, but it is a service which benefits the patient and which patients value. Also, all of you have a special sort of niche service that can be provided. That is the face-to-face time you spend with patients. As I said, Patients tend to like that. They don't like doctors turning their back on patients, playing with the electronic health record, or giving them the bum's rush. You've got 5 minutes to tell me about your problem, and I'll send in an NP or a PA to deal with it. So that in itself is a value that all opted out physicians can offer. So what will happen to physicians who remain in Medicare? Well, there's still the Independent Payment Advisory Board yet to be appointed. Their whole goal is to reduce Medicare payments. Then there's the alternative payment models, the ACOs, which is capitation on steroids. It didn't work back in the 1990s. Why they think it will work now is beyond me. And again, the ACOs are a feudal system where a lump sum is paid to the ACO, which may be run by a hospital or insurance company or both combined, and then they just decide what to distribute to the serfs, the physicians who work under the ACO model. So as I mentioned, we've got that merit-based incentive program, which is going to replace the two separate programs of meaningful use and the physician quality reporting system, but it's still more and more hoops for physicians to jump through. Again, under the MIPS system, physicians will be assigned a composite performance score, and the rewards will be quite minimal. There are also some non-financial considerations as far as opting out of Medicare. And number one on the list is the freedom and pleasure of practicing medicine again, instead of practicing bureaucracy. I think very few people in this room went into medicine with the idea that they really love practicing bureaucracy and would like to do more of that. So you need to kick the 2,000-pound government gorilla out of your exam room. And again, that will lead to not only more happiness on the part of patients, but on the part of the physician as well, who may be then less burned out and able to provide higher quality care. Again, there's the positive patient experience of protecting patient privacy. You're no longer filing electronic data on all their personal confidential information. And there's no fear of the ruinous fines or prison time for inadvertent coding errors or running afoul of some Medicare law, rule, or regulation. You don't have to worry about the RACs, the bounty hunters, the Z-picks, and basically, you sleep better at night. Simplification, the opt-out physicians don't need to use any codes in serving Medicare patients. There's no claims to file, no more constant Medicare hassles, more time to spend actually treating patients, and more time to spend with your family. So basically, it's allowing a physician to experience the joy of practicing medicine again. In making your decision about opting out of Medicare, you should check all of your contracts and hospital bylaws to ensure that there are no conflicts. And again, if you're not sure, ask an attorney to review your contracts and any other legal documents that may be pertinent. So what is the procedure for opting out? Again, you have this in your packet, which you can refer to. It's also on the AAPS website. The procedure for opting out of Medicare is a little different for non-participating physicians versus participating. And a lot of physicians don't, and a lot of patients don't understand the difference. A participating physician is one who signs an agreement with Medicare, agreeing to accept Medicare payment in full and not balance bill the patient for every single patient. A non-participating physician does not sign such an agreement and handles Medicare patients on a case-by-case basis. They can accept assignment or not accept assignment. If they don't accept assignment, then they are limited by federal and sometimes state law as to how much they can balance bill the Medicare patient. The opted-out Medicare physician typically is enrolled in Medicare, but is opt-out status, meaning that the doctor does not submit any claims, the patient does not submit any claims to Medicare, and there are no fee restrictions imposed by the government. So non-participating physicians can opt out of Medicare any time during the year. And a copy of the opt-out affidavit must be provided to the Medicare carriers if you deal with more than one. Give it to all of them no later than 10 days after the first contract to which the affidavit applies. I would highly recommend you not wait until that point. I would highly recommend that you submit these affidavits well in advance, perhaps 6 months in advance, so as to accommodate the Medicare bungling factor. These bureaucrats do almost nothing in a competent fashion. And so you have to accommodate for that. You have to anticipate possible delays. So start early, probably 6 months in advance. You should also know that there is a 90-day grace period after filing only the first affidavit, during which the physician may withdraw the opt-out affidavit, and then basically the physician returns to the same status he or she was prior to the opt-out. And again, be sure to check all of your contracts to see that there's no impediment in opting out. Participating physicians can only opt out 4 times during the year. And the Medicare contractor must receive the opt-out affidavit from you 1 month before the beginning of the next calendar quarter. And again, all of this is in your packet. It's also on the AAPS website. So the deadlines for a carrier receiving an opt-out affidavit is March 1st, June 1st, September 1st, and December 1st. Once you're opted out of Medicare, you unfortunately, if you practice in situations that involve emergency or urgent care, you're never entirely out of Medicare, because Medicare says you cannot make a first contract, an initial contract with a patient under an emergent or urgent care situation. In that situation, you do have the ability to file a claim with Medicare, and again, if you don't accept assignment, limiting charges will apply. As I mentioned, there is an early termination of opt-out if you decide it's just not working. It only applies to the first time that you opt out, and there's some significant consequences. If you do that, you must refund to every beneficiary with whom you privately contracted all amounts collected in excess of the Medicare limiting charge. You must notify all beneficiaries with whom you entered into private contracts of the termination of the opt-out and the beneficiary's rights to have you file claims on their behalf for services provided during the opt-out period. And so there are some significant consequences if you decide to go for the early termination of the opt-out. And again, you can download step-by-step instructions for opting out, both for participating and non-participating physicians. We have the opt-out affidavit, which you can download and fill out. And again, we have people on the AAPS website in various specialties who have agreed to serve as mentors and answer questions for those in their specialty who may wonder how it works in their specialty. What about hospitalizations, labs, radiology tests, supplies, and home health care? Well, physicians who are currently in the Medicare system, either as a participating or non-participating physician who opt out of Medicare, already have an NPI number and are in what's called the PACOS database. And those physicians generally should have no trouble having Medicare pay for hospitalizations, labs, radiology services, or home health care services. Now, we're aware of a nationwide trend whereby independent physicians are being eliminated from the hospital practice environment. The ACOs and managed care networks are looking for very narrow networks, excluding a lot of physicians. And again, the ACOs, the accountable care organizations, are looking to have their patients treated by physicians who are in network. So when I say generally, be aware that there's a trend that they're trying to get rid of independent physicians from treating patients in hospitals. If you don't know if you're in the government's PACOS database or not, this is the website you can go to check. And again, that's in the packet. Medications and referrals to specialists are generally excluded from the ordering and referring rule. However, again, opt-out physicians who do not have an NPI number cannot get Part D drugs covered by Medicare. And physicians who have never enrolled in Medicare do not have to enroll in Medicare in order to opt out. And again, there's a special form, it's CMS Form 8550, for physicians who are not enrolled in Medicare. And you can fill out this form, which is for ordering and referring purposes only. However, you must have an NPI in order to fill out this form. And there are some physicians, like myself, who have not agreed to the NPI number. If an opt-out provider elects to order and refer services, Medicare contractors must develop for the following information through an additional information request. Again, they're going to be looking for an NPI number. They're going to be looking for confirmation that There's no exclusion from the Medicare program. They're going to be looking for your date of birth. They're going to be looking for your Social Security number. And if the above information is not obtained from the opted out physician, then the coverage will not be there. However, it should not affect the physician's ability to opt out of Medicare if they refuse to provide this information. So again, where can you go for help? Well, AAPS offers seminars like this, Thrive Not Just Survive seminars. This is the 24th time we've offered such a seminar. And all the details, of course, are on the AAPS website. And again, I'd like to emphasize that a tax-deductible donation to our AAPS Educational Foundation can help expand our medical student program, the ability to bring medical students or residents to some of these meetings so that they get something other than the socialist propaganda that they're taught in medical schools, which doesn't include anything about freedom in medicine. Tips for opting out: start at least 6 months in advance. Again, the reason being that Medicare bureaucrats are totally incompetent. I would highly recommend that you send a cover letter, certified mail, return receipt to the Medicare carrier with the opt-out affidavit requesting written acknowledgement that the opt-out has been properly accomplished, because otherwise you may find 2 years later the government, the Medicare program says, well, we don't have any evidence you ever submitted an affidavit. It must have been lost. We never got it. And you're going to have to go back and refund all that money to your Medicare patients and file all those claims. So you need some written acknowledgement. That's what I showed you that I framed and put on my office wall. I'm very proud of it. And you also need office procedures to be in place so that no Medicare claims are filed except in cases of emergencies or urgent care. So again, if you have specific questions about opting out of Medicare or transitioning to a third-party free practice, feel free to call AAPS at our toll-free number to headquarters. And thank you very much for your attention today.